Chapter 12. For the second time in a little over a week, Sarah found herself in the hospital. This time, however, it wasn't just a quick checkup before sending her home. Bill had gotten her good, taking a direct hit from a werewolf talon. Wasn't something a regular human could spring back from. Sarah couldn't remember getting to the hospital or even the first 2 days. When she awoke, she was staring at the hospital room ceiling. Her side ached with a dull pain, and she felt as if someone had taken her head and shaken it around. Her throat was dry and she let out a hoarse croak of surprise. This got the attention of someone because she suddenly heard a man mumble, "She's awake." To her surprise, Logan's face came into view. For some reason, Sarah thought he would have skipped town after the fight, but here he was, in the flesh, looking at her with a concerned expression. "Sarah," he said, "wait here." He raised a cup of water to her mouth and she gulped it down, realizing just how thirsty she was. When it was done, she leaned back against the pillows, exhaling slowly, wincing. "God, I feel like I've been hit by a truck." Logan brushed her hair out of her face, cupping her cheek. It was a familiar touch, one that grounded her to the reality of everything that had unfolded recently. Her brain began to catch up with her body, reliving the trek to the crystal pools, the fight, Bill injuring her. Her hands went to her side, touching it gingerly. "I don't remember how I got here. I just remember Bill. She trailed off, meeting Logan's eyes. He nodded in confirmation. His thumb brushed against her cheek, stirring her feelings back up. "You fainted by the time I got to you. When I saw you, I was terrified. I didn't know. Well, I hurried to get you help as quickly as possible. You had a phone on you. I called for help, got you to the outskirts of the woods in time. It was touch and go for a while. You lost a lot of blood. And the cuts were deep. Lots of sticks there." "Great," Sarah replied wryly. "Well, I shouldn't be surprised, should I? I had avoided being injured the whole time. Seems to make sense I wouldn't be completely lucky, each brush with danger." Logan cupped her hands, bringing them against his lips, kissing them gently. "Sarah, I didn't want you to follow me. I was trying to protect you." She shook her head. "You don't get to decide that for me. The whole reason I found you was to be with you, to figure it out together. You can't just decide to run off like that." "But look what happened." His voice caught. "You could have died when I saw him strike you. But you were going to die. You know it. He had you pinned by the water. If I hadn't done something." She looked at him steadily, refusing to back down. "Even if you don't admit it, I know what I did. I know that I helped you." "You didn't help me," Logan replied, and her heart fell. "You saved my life." "You're right. He had me pinned. I wasn't going to break free. Bill was strong and powerful. A tank of a fighter. Once I get cornered, it is a struggle for me. But you ran in there fearlessly and distracted him so I could break free. You were like an angel." Her face aflame, she mumbled, "Please. I was not. When I saw Bill hit you, I was terrified you were killed. All I wanted in that moment was to get rid of him and make sure you were all right. But of course you pulled through. You always do. Since we met, you have been brave. Beyond brave. For someone suddenly thrust into everything. I'm nothing special." He squeezed her hands hard, shaking his head. "Don't say that about yourself, Sarah. You're the bravest person I have ever met. I used to think Gene was someone special, but what I learned about him, what I struggled with, made me realize the man I admired and thought of as family was nothing more than a killer in a pleasing disguise. I never belonged with Liam's pack either. Have wandered around, struggling to find someone I understood, who understood me." He was looking at her now, so intently that Sarah thought her heart might burst. It felt as if he was so close to exposing his soul to her. The door to the hospital suddenly opened. Millie stood in the doorway, holding a large bouquet of flowers which blocked her face from view. Behind her stood Liam. "She's awake," Liam mumbled to Millie, who came bounding in. She put the flowers on the table next to Sarah's bed. "Are you okay? Thank God. You are awake. I was so scared." The moment broken, Logan's eyes shuddered and he let go of Sarah's hands. She wanted to tell him to stay and tell her what he was going to say, but not with Millie and Liam here. "I'm fine," Sarah said. "Honestly, I think I will be home soon. I'm going to place some of the pack nearby. Bill is gone, but he had a couple of helpers, just in case they get any ideas," Liam said. "I doubt it," Logan replied. They were cowards. They know if they show up, they'll be made outcasts. Easier just to skip town without that mark on them. Liam shifted uncomfortably, everyone acutely aware that Logan was one. Millie spoke. In any case, your place will be safe to return to, and you can take all the time you need to recover, Sarah. I mean it. Once you're fully recovered and doing okay, you can start helping me with the business. Logan glanced at her in surprise and Sarah smiled. That sounds great. Thank you. It was a far cry how the first hospital trip had gone, where Marion berated her. Alone, disoriented, struggling to understand everything, Sarah had never felt more alone. Now she had Logan by her side with Millie and Liam talking and chatting. It felt less like a hospital visit and more like friends talking. She looked at Logan out of the corner of her eye, hoping to get a better read on him. Even though he was laughing and smiling, it didn't reach his eyes, and the familiar fear of him skipping town returned. Sarah stayed at the hospital for a couple more days before finally being discharged. She had sticks and painkillers in case the pain ever kicked back. The doctors also informed her it was more than likely she would be scarred. Along her side. Great, she had thought, who doesn't love someone with a giant werewolf scar on their side? Even with the promise of the scar, Sarah didn't regret going to the crystal. Fools. Logan would have died if she hadn't, and the idea of sitting around, doing nothing, and discovering he passed away would have haunted her for the rest of her days. Millie helped Sarah settle in, fluttering about, talking a mile a minute to the point where she was getting a headache. She knew her friend was working to make amends with college, with the werewolves, all of it, but right now, all she wanted was to sleep. When Millie finally left, Sarah was worried she would fear sleeping at her apartment again. The last time she had been here was when she fought with Logan. But Sarah was simply too tired to care about being alone. Knowing there were members of Liam's pack around the area helped as well. She didn't think anyone would be coming after her, but the extra security allowed her to sleep dreamless sleep for once. A knock on the door jostled her out of sleep. It sounded far away, and it took Sarah a few moments to recall that it wasn't someone knocking on the hospital door but her own front door. Groggily, she looked at the clock. Somehow she had slept through the night and well into the afternoon. Getting out of bed, she relaxed a bit. Her side only ached a little, making it easy to move. Her body had clearly needed the rest. She padded into the living room and opened the front door, not thinking for a second it would be Logan. But there he was, looking as sheepish as he did on the first day he came to her apartment. And just like that time, Sarah became acutely aware of how she looked like a mess. Face blushing, she invited him inside. I just woke up, she said by way of apology. No, I should have called, but I wasn't sure of your phone number on that burner phone of yours. Oh, I don't even have it anymore. I tossed it. I was going to get a new, proper cell phone tomorrow, Sarah replied. He nodded, standing awkwardly in the living room. Sarah suddenly felt grimy and gross, desperately needing a shower, especially now that Logan was here. She cleared her throat and spoke. Listen, are you okay waiting as I shower? Just feel disgusting. I tried showering in the hospital, but I hate showering in places that aren't mine. I get it. I've been crashing at Liam's, and the shower there takes some getting used to. She smiled, glad that he was at Liam's, not somewhere lost in St. Neuri, and darted off to shower. She was anxious to know why he had come by, hoping he wanted to talk to her about them, about those kisses and stolen moments. After the shower, Sarah took time to look at her sticks in the mirror. It was healing nicely. The pain, once intense and throbbing, was now dull. The wound had softened to a pale pink. The stitches would come out soon. The scar would remain. Afterwards, she dressed and opened the bedroom door to see Logan hovering in the doorway. Instantly, he looked embarrassed. Sorry, I got worried that you fainted or something. She laughed a little. Your concern is touching, but I just move slowly. How is your side? Better. A lot better, actually. It's healing faster than I thought it would. I mean, it is no werewolf healing, of course, but I'm glad it is going all right. Logan looked relieved. Sarah took a step back, turning around to reach for her hairbrush. Logan took a step into the room, looking around. This is cozy. This whole apartment, it feels safe and secure. I like it. It used to be my escape. I liked hiding out in here. I would go to work and hate everything and then come home and watch TV, Sarah said as she ran the brush through her hair, her back to Logan, feeling acutely aware that he was in her space. And now it doesn't feel like I need to hide out in here so much. Isn't that? How much can change in such a short time? Even coming back here didn't feel like I was returning to my safe hideout. Felt like I was just coming to my apartment. She paused for a moment, shaking her head. That probably doesn't even make sense. Logan was behind her now, gently taking the brush out of her hand and putting it on the dresser. Sarah's heart thumped wildly as he moved her hair out of the way and brought his lips to her neck. She closed her eyes, the warmth spreading through her body. His lips trailed down her neck, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her back against him. She knew they were tumbling off a ledge. The feeling in the air was different. Intense, bristling with energy that had been built up. Sarah didn't hesitate or question anything. She wanted him more than anything else she ever encountered in her life. He whispered her name and she turned to face him. Their lips met hungrily, kiss with tongues exploring each other's mouths, Sarah's back striking the dresser from the sheer force of it. Clothes began to tumble off. Logan's jacket hit the ground and then his t-shirt. Sarah could only take a moment to stare at the muscles, running her fingers over them and feeling the heat of his skin. Logan was in perfect shape, muscled and toned like someone Sarah would have seen on magazines. Her normal self-consciousness about her body didn't appear, however, as Logan gently pulled off her shirt, standing in front of him in only her underwear. She felt no urge to hide or cover up. She liked him seeing all of her like this. Grabbing his hand, she led him towards the bed, falling back on it, allowing Logan to drink in the sight of her body. "You're beautiful," he said in a taut voice as he pulled the belt off his jeans. "Since the first moment I saw you, I thought you were beautiful. Your body, those curves of yours, those gorgeous eyes." Sarah's face flushed with color at his words, and seeing him fully undress, he looked at her with unmistakable lust in his eyes as he began to crawl over her. She could feel how hard he was against her thigh. Every nerve in her body was grabbing out for him. It made her head light and dizzy with desire. His lips found hers once more and he kissed her. They were skin to skin now. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she held on to him. The kiss broke and Logan was looking into her eyes before speaking. "I love you, Sarah." The words rolled through her, shock spreading out, her limbs tingling. Never had Sarah thought that she would hear those words, especially from Logan. She was startled into silence, but Logan didn't notice. He wasn't yet finished. "I fell for you instantly. I can't even explain it. I have never felt that way for someone before. It swept over me like a wave. I was helpless to it. Is it crazy to feel so strongly about you so quickly?" He was slightly rambling now, but Sarah wasn't going to stop him. "Even if it is, I don't care." He leaned down and began to leave a trail of kisses along her shoulder, to her neck. "I want you and only you. I want to be with you, Sarah, if you will have me. I want to see where things go with us." He kissed her gently and looked into her eyes. She was in no place to refuse him. Not after what they went through together, or how her feelings had taken her over so swiftly. Sarah didn't want him to leave St. Neuri. She wanted him to stay here and be with her. Was there ever any question about the depth of her feelings for him? The way Logan came in so simply and annihilated the careful shielding of her heart? "I love you too," Sarah whispered back. Logan's eyes widened in surprise and then a smile broke out across his face. He kissed her again, soft and gentle this time, as his hands made sure not to touch her injury. Both knew they would have to go slow and soft this time. Logan positioned himself at her entrance and then slowly began to enter her. Sarah gasped as he filled her up, wrapping her arms around his neck, holding him close. He let out a low groan as he entered her. She could feel how large he was, easily the biggest man she had been with, and closed her eyes. Slowly Logan began to thrust. It was just enough that it gave her pleasure, but didn't hurt her. Each movement was languid, as if they had all the time in the world. Sarah gave herself over to him completely, rocking her hips in time with his thrusts. Logan kissed her neck. Her hands traveled down his back. His lips dragged across her shoulders. The slow pace caused the pressure to mount in between her legs. Even though he was a werewolf, even though Sarah had seen the full extent of his power, she felt safe in his arms, knowing he would never hurt her. As Logan thrust, their breathing grew ragged in unison. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt small, pushed against a man Their skin was pressed together, the sound of his grunts filling the air as he thrust inside her. Sarah's back arched and she let out a small moan which only seemed to spurn Logan on more. He was moaning her name now. It sounded good coming out of his mouth, even though the movements were slow. It was somehow making her feel better than any other sex she had before. She knew that she was close to toppling over the edge to be with him completely. By the way Logan was breathing, she also thought that he was nearing his climax as well. "I love you," he said once more, his voice hoarse in her ear, and she clung to him, letting his words wash over her. "I love you too," Sarah whispered back. Her fingernails dug into his back as her head rolled backwards in pleasure. Her climax rolled over her, intense, sweeping her along with it as she bucked her hips wildly against Logan. He went still inside her, groaning loudly as he climaxed as well. They came in unison, holding onto each other, united at last. Sarah lost herself in the pleasure, the past events melting away. In this moment there was only Logan, his body against hers, his fingertips along her skin, his moans in her ear. Nothing else mattered. Ever since Sarah saw Logan, her world had been about him. Now they were together at last. Afterwards, they lay together in comfortable silence with Sarah resting her head against his chest. She could hear the steady beat of his heart, trailing her fingers along his chest. Marveling at the turn of events, she finally felt relaxed. "Is your side okay?" Logan asked, breaking the silence. "I tried not to go too hard." She smiled against his skin. "I'm fine, promise." His fingers were along her back now, slowly trailing along her skin, leaving goosebumps all over. Logan gently placed a kiss on the top of her head. Even though it was the middle of the day, Sarah was already feeling sleepy again, and yawned. "Need to rest?" he asked. "I don't want you to go," she mumbled. Even though Sarah couldn't see his face, she could still hear the smile in his voice when he replied with, "I'm not going anywhere." "You promise?" she asked. "I don't want you to feel as though you have to stay here as an outcast or feeling alone." "I'm not alone. I have you, don't I?" Logan replied easily. "I'll find a place of my own where Liam's pack activity is the lightest." He cleared his throat. "Liam is going to help me find a job." Surprised, Sarah propped herself up and looked at him. "Really?" "Yes. Unofficially, of course. But he is going to pull some strings. Get me set up somewhere where I don't feel like I need to hide out." "But how will the pack take it to see you here?" "Being an outcast doesn't mean I have to leave. Just means life might be harder. But with you, I don't want to run, Sarah," he said seriously. "I want to stay here with you, the woman I love, and see where this goes." "Few would like that." "I want that too." She couldn't look at him, too shy suddenly to look him in the eye as she spoke. "I know it is crazy how fast everything has unfolded, but I know how I feel about you. How intensely it came over me, how I wanted to be around you and make sure you are okay." Logan's fingers were under her chin, tilting her face up just enough so she had to look at him. His gaze was steady, filled with warmth. "Sarah, I was connected to you instantly. As a werewolf, you never know when things will become too dangerous, when life will be cut short. That's just part of the life. Living fast, not holding back when emotions slam into you and show you what you want. And I want you. Enough to stay in St. Neuri. Enough to be here with you." She leaned forward and kissed him. The kiss was gentle, filled with promise. In that moment, Sarah marveled at just how much had changed. Not only in her life being with Logan, but with work, how she was treated, what she wanted from it. Strange how everything could change so quickly. But for the first time in Sarah's life, things were perfect. Epilogue. 1 year later. Sarah was fretting, staring at herself in the mirror. In that moment she saw everything she hated about her body on full display. She ran her fingers over the beading of the dress, exhaling slowly. Was she overthinking things? More than likely. No matter how much she grew as a person, certain hang-ups remained. Millie appeared in the reflection, her face set in a serious expression. "Whatever you are thinking, stop it," her best friend said sternly. "I look fat," Sarah grumbled. "Nope, we aren't doing this today. Not on your wedding day." The words bounced around in her skull. My wedding day. It was a day she never thought would come. So much time passed in her apartment, reading her books, watching TV, drinking her tea and going off to work for Mary Ann. Now she was about to marry Logan. Logan, a man who swept into her life like a tornado, turned it upside down, left things scattered. But along with that craziness, he brought light and love to her existence. You promise I look all right? Sarah asked Millie. Yes. Her friend swore, fiddling with her veil. Sometimes Sarah got the feeling Millie was more nervous than she was about the whole event. Millie wanted everything to be perfect for her. They had become so close, rekindling the friendship they had as teenagers that now they felt like sisters more than anything else. Sarah welcomed it. The past had been sorted, and she no longer resented Millie for what occurred. Working with Millie the past year had gone better than expected. They made a great team, setting up the office in downtown St. Neuri. They even hired Mary and to help broker the deal because no matter how much Sarah changed, she still felt a bit guilty for quitting how she did. Liam said she was too kind, but she decided to take it as a compliment. After all, if Marian hadn't told her to go to the house on Brook Street, then none of this would have happened. With Artemis Blossom taking off in St. Neuri, things went better than either of them expected. Millie, originally nervous at relocating away from the city, now didn't regret it at all. People were so anxious to work with the label that they came to her. Sarah was her right hand, organizing, planning, scheduling meetings and events. It was a brisk change of pace from the Real estate office, but it never actually felt like work. It felt like merely an extension of her new life. She loved it, loved working with Millie and being part of the fashion world. Millie had designed her wedding dress and Sarah loved it. Pure white with intricate beading, a flowing skirt and lace sleeves. It fit her like a glove, and she was enchanted by it. Millie wouldn't even hear of Sarah paying her for it either. I owe you, was all she said, and would not hear of any argument against it. The dress was her dream dress. It was the sort of dress women would wish to have, and now Sarah had it. She had so much. Sarah pushed the self-doubt down. Logan had made it perfectly clear how much he adored her body. Her curves, large thighs, all of it, but she still occasionally was plagued by issues regarding her size. Some things took more work than others, and her self-esteem just happened to be one of those things. But Millie was right. Today wasn't the day to listen to that nagging voice. She leaned over and fixed a brooch to the front of Sarah's dress. It glittered under the sunlight pouring into the room and sparkled like a gem. She touched it gingerly. A wolf? Isn't that a little dead on? Tongue-in-cheek, Millie remarked. She smiled. There were no other bridesmaids fluttering about. Attendance in the church was tiny. Neither Logan nor Sarah wanted a fuss. Just something quiet to cement their place in each other's lives. Millie fixed the veil, making sure it looked perfect, and then stretched out her hand. Ready? The answer was no, but Sarah nodded. She felt nervous, butterflies careening around her stomach. The fact that she was getting married was crazy to her. Never did she think she was the marrying type. Millie led her down the hallway, handing her the bouquet as Sarah reflected on the last year. They had moved out of her apartment after 4 months of dating and got their own place on the outskirts of St. Neuri. It was a tiny house built for two, but cozy and safe, which is what Sarah wanted. It had a backyard with lots of space leading directly to the woods for Logan. The days they didn't work were spent making love in the mornings, sharing breakfast together and curled up in each other's company. The evenings were spent with nights watching movies or Logan out in the woods as a wolf. Sometimes she would go with him, exploring the woods safely with him. It was a life she never dreamt of having. Now that it was hers, she wanted to treasure it. 2 months ago, Sarah had come home from work after Logan texted her that it was urgent. Worried that some trouble had sprung up with Liam's pack, she hurried to their house. Liam's pack left Logan alone, but she knew there was hostility that not only remained, but Liam was considering inviting him back into the pack. But when she had come home, the living room was brimming with candles and Logan stood there waiting for her. I love you more than anything. This time with you has brought me the greatest happiness, he said as he dropped to one knee. Sarah, will you marry me? How could she refuse a man like him? And now the church doors were opening and she was going to be walking down the aisle. Her hands shook slightly. She hoped no one could tell. As the doors opened, everything else faded to the sight of Logan waiting for her at the altar, dressed in a tuxedo. He looked so handsome that her heart ached. How crazy life was since he came in. but how wonderful and magical it was as well. Logan looked shocked when he saw her coming towards him. Were his eyes welling up with tears? He rubbed at his face furiously and she knew that he was crying. That made her start to feel emotional as well. Your makeup, Millie hissed as a warning. Sarah let out a small laugh and before she knew it, she was standing in front of him. He was looking at her, grabbing her hands instantly. Up this close, she could read his every thought, the love that radiated from him. As the vows were recited and the rings were exchanged, Sarah's heart felt as though it might pop with joy and happiness. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Logan leaned down, kissing her with such passion that she could feel herself blushing. Then she took his hand in hers, turning to face the church, knowing that they had overcome the odds, overcome the danger and fear to be together. That no matter what happened, the future was theirs to map out, that the secrets of St. Neuri belonged to them now. Sarah tilted her head to look at Logan, who smiled at her. It was a smile she had never seen on his face before. Pure joy, pure love, the promise of protection for all her days. Then she looked at the church of the small community of friends she had discovered through working at Artemis Blossom, to Liam, to Millie, and she let out a laugh of happiness. Finally, things were exactly how she dreamt they could